Oh, hello. Uh, I just have to make sure going out of my headset. Okay. All right. Problem solved. Whew. Hi everyone. How are you all doing? I hope you're well. No one's saying anything. Can anyone hear me? Oh, good, good. That's great. Excellent. All right. We're going to do a little something a little bit different today. Firstly, as you know, we're getting outside of the textbook. So, the final two chapters in Kim are about consciousness, and they're good. But I find I really struggle to, I don't know, I struggle to teach this topic the way that Kim treats it in the book. The last few years, I've always kind of somewhat skipped these two. I've made them optional but recommended. Previously, I've used a couple of chapters from Susan Blackmore's excellent book, Consciousness and Introduction, and we used the second edition. But this year, I thought what we would do is go right to the source. So, as you know, we're reading Thomas Nagel's What It's Like to Be a Bat, and then we're going to look at Dennett's Quining Qualia. So, today we're just going to look at Nagel. Now, what I thought we would do is, um, in addition to getting outside of the textbook, is we are going to read this paper together, or you are going to read it along with me. So I've already read this paper, but I'm going to read it again. And the idea there is to show you, in addition to teaching you about consciousness and subjectivity and Nagel's famous uh, sort of imaginative exercise, imagining oneself to be a bat. In addition to learning about all of that, you will get to see how somebody like me reads and evaluates a paper. So I'll read it, we'll annotate it, I'll explain things to you as I go, not just things in the paper, but also my thought process. The idea being that when it comes to your final paper, when you're reading through your sources that you found, you can do something similar. So we're not just going to learn about consciousness as subjectivity. We're not just going to learn what Nagel has to say in this paper, but you're also going to learn how to, I guess we'll say, critically evaluate or sort of evaluate in that sort of scholarly manner a paper like this. So yes, this is what it is it like to be a bat, and it's a very, very famous paper. Uh, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Grant. Although, because as we'll see, the problem of subjectivity, you can never know what it is like to be Josh, just as I can never know what it is like to be one of you. I can use my imagination to a limited extent. Um, but again, the problem gets worse if we're talking bats or other conscious creatures. By the way, one thing I want to say right off the bat, this paper, as I mentioned a moment ago, is quite famous. Um, it's famous because of Nagel's, well, I'm hesitant to call it a thought experiment because it's not really a thought experiment. I guess it can, I guess it is and it isn't. I don't think of it as a thought experiment. It's more like an illustrative example of the kind of problem that Nagel is trying to show us. And that is what we call in consciousness studies the problem of subjectivity. Essentially, what it boils down to is uh, we have all of these tools available to us, the tools of the cognitive sciences, to try and understand the mind and the brain. We've got, mental imaging like fMRI, EEG, PET, MEG, diffusion tensor imaging, all that stuff. We have got um, cognitive psychology, which generates models of mental processes. We've got um, connectionist networks, which are sort of inspired by the brain and which we can use to model um, the various ways in which cognitive functions or mental functions might be physically realized in brains. But those are all objective tools. And consciousness is subjective. So you'll see that this is very related to what David Chalmers has called the hard problem of consciousness. We've got the hard problem. So we got the easy problems. That's like figuring out that's like all the stuff I just said. Like um localizing different cognitive functions to different areas of the brain using um mental imaging, looking for double dissociations of function and that sort of thing. Easy. Um, Modeling information processing pathways in the mind brain. Easy. Studying things like reaction time or the relation between um, external stimuli and reported experiences, like the psychophysics stuff, luminosity with perceived brightness, sound pressure with perceived loudness. Easy. Those are the easy problems. The problems that we can tackle with the tools we already have in the cognitive sciences. The hard problem is explaining subjective consciousness. Why is there something that it's like to be a conscious being? That's the hard problem. This is all related to that. And that's sort of what this paper is known for. But as I was reading through it, I noticed that there's a sort of second really important element to Nagel's discussion that often gets overlooked when this paper is discussed, and that's sort of an epistemological problem that's got to do with the difference between understanding that and understanding how. So we can understand that, for example, bats might be conscious. We don't really understand the how, right? How is it like, or what is it like to be a bat? So there's an epistemological thing there too that we'll look at. Um, right off the bat. See what you did there. All right, so what is it like to be a bat? Thomas Nagel, published in the Philosophical Review in 1974. Let's have a look. Let's get started. I'm not going to read it all exhaustively. Um, there might be some bits that I'll skip, but this is like we're reading a paper together. And just to show you, we'll be able to do it in the time that we have if I stop blabbering on. So here we go. Consciousness is what makes the mind-body problem really intractable. And of course, we know what the mind-body problem is. This is how Kim frames his discussion of the mental in the textbook that we've been using, after all. Perhaps that is why current discussions of the problem give it little attention or get it obviously wrong. The recent wave of reductionist euphoria has produced several analyses of mental phenomena and mental concepts designed to explain the possibility of some variety of materialism, psychophysical identification, or reduction. And we know many of these examples, right? In fact, if we go down to that footnote, we can see some of these. For example, SMART. We haven't looked at this particular reading, but we have looked at some of SMART stuff. Let's see, David Lewis from the Ramsey Lewis method. We've got Dennett. I know we've got Putnam, psychological predicates. That was um, that was one of the extra readings for functionalism. Kripke, naming a necessity. We didn't look at that, but Kim draws on Kripke from time to time. So we know these are like sort of materialist or physicalist reductionist theories. Um, so we've seen exactly what Nagel is talking about here. But he continues, the problems dealt with are those common to this type of reduction and other types, and what makes the mind-body problem unique, and unlike the water H2O problem, or the Turing machine IBM machine problem, or the lightning electrical discharge problem, or the gene DNA problem, or the oak tree hydrocarbon problem is ignored. I'm just going to highlight this because this is key, I think, to understanding what's about to take place. So I'm going to highlight that just so I keep it in mind in case I want to do something with it later. Every reductionist has his favorite analogy from modern science. It is most unlikely that any of these unrelated examples of successful reduction will shed light on the reduction of mind to brain. So just going back, see, I knew I highlighted this for a reason. Water is identical with H2O, so it's a sort of eliminative reduction. Likewise with the lightning electrical discharge example. Kim uses this in the textbook. So if you'll recall, um, when he was talking about identities, like lightning isn't caused by electrical discharge. Lightning is electrical discharge. That's the idea with identity theory, right? Brain activity doesn't cause mental states. Brain activity and mental states are identical. So just for example. Then we have the Turing machine, IBM machine problem. That's more of a functionalist example, but you get the idea. Philosophers share the general human weakness for explanations of what is incomprehensible in terms suited for what is familiar and well understood, though entirely different. A little bit of foreshadowing here, because he's going to use the unfamiliar example of bat experience to show us how we try and use these familiar examples to try and understand things that we are in no way familiar. Um, so, in no way familiar with. This has led to the acceptance of implausible accounts of the mental, largely because they would permit familiar kinds of reduction. So Nagel is going for to see if we can to do some unfamiliar kinds of reduction, I suppose. I shall try to explain why the usual examples do not help to understand the relation between the mind and the body. Indeed, why we have at present no conception of what an explanation of the physical nature of a mental phenomenon would be. I'm going to highlight that. Without consciousness, the mind-body problem would be much less interesting. With consciousness, it seems hopeless. That if I were writing a paper on consciousness for my final paper in this class, that would be a cool quote to use for a hook or for illustrative purposes. It's punchy, right? Like Nagel's writing here is very punchy. I want you to write in a punchy way like that. And I also think you can use punchy quotes like that to try and spice up your work. It's like when you're cooking and you add a little extra seasoning. So if your paper is like a dish, you want to spice it up with some cool quotes from other thinkers. The most important and characteristic feature of conscious mental phenomena is very poorly understood. Most reductionist theories do not even try to explain it, and careful examination will show that no currently available concept of reduction is applicable to it. Perhaps a new theoretical form can be devised for the purpose, but such a solution, if it exists, lies in the distant intellectual future. So the kinds of reductions that we're making in mind and in the cognitive sciences. Mind as the brain, mind as behavior, mind as computation. They all miss something, and it's subjective consciousness. This is what makes the hard problems hard, according to thinkers like Chalmers. And this is why Nagel says what he does earlier, like without consciousness, the mind-body problem would be much less interesting. Consciousness is what makes it both interesting and difficult. So conscious experience, he says, is a widespread phenomenon. It occurs at many levels of animal life, though we cannot be sure of its presence in the simpler organisms, and it is very difficult to say in general what provides evidence of it. Some extremists have been prepared to deny it even of mammals other than man. Descartes, for example. No doubt it occurs in countless forms totally unimaginable to us on other planets in the solar systems throughout the universe. But no matter how the form may vary, the fact that an organism has consciousness at all means basically that there is something it is like to be that organism. We're going to highlight that because that is the definition of consciousness that pretty much anybody who's interested in consciousness uses now is this definition here from Nagel. When we are talking about, in fact, I'm going to add a note. Uh, Here we go. I can add a little note, or no, this is my note. put a little note here for myself. Again, I'm pretending I'm writing a paper, right? So I got to add a note that this is phenomenal consciousness. Get myself out of the way here. So what do I mean by phenomenal consciousness? In this context, phenomenal from phenomenology um, means that there is something that it is like to be conscious. So when Nagel says, but no matter how the form may vary, the fact that an organism has conscious experience at all means basically that there is something it is like to be that organism. We can distinguish this as thinkers like Ned Block do from access consciousness. Access consciousness, and this all these extra details I'm giving you are in Kim, right? So make sure you read those too. But access consciousness means it refers to information that's available in reasoning and planning. So access consciousness might involve uh, solving problems or even simple behaviors like reaching out and picking up this coffee cup. Interestingly, um, and as a sort of a side note, we have a dual process visual system. We have one stream of processing, the ventral stream, which goes from the primary visual cortex ultimately to the temporal areas in your brain, which is what we use to identify objects. So when I look at the coffee cup and recognize it as such, if you say, pass me the coffee cup, and I go, oh, this, yes, here you go. I'm using um, my ventral stream. And this the information in this visual stream is available for it's like available for consciousness. It's the conscious stream. It's the phenomenal stream. You also have another stream called the dorsal stream, which goes from the visual area up to the parietal cortex, kind of into your premotor and motor areas. We call this the vision for action stream, or as V.S. Ramachandran calls it, it's the zombie in the head. This is what we actually use when we reach out and grasp things like coffee cups, or like if we reach out to open a door. And it's not conscious. This is like access consciousness. And the really freaky part is that we don't use conscious visual information to guide our intentional actions when we're picking up objects or opening doors. It seems like we do, but we don't. We know this from lots of different lines of evidence. So anyway, to continue with Nagel, there may be further implications about the form of the experience, the conscious experience of different creatures, that is. There may even, though I doubt it, be implications about the behavior of the organism. But fundamentally, an organism has conscious mental states if and only if there is something that it is like to be that organism, something it is like for the organism. Highlight that again, because that's also quite important right there. We may call this the subjective character of experience. It is not captured by any of the familiar, recently devised reductive analyses of the mental. For all of them are logically compatible with its absence. This is a point that's been made by Kim, right? Functionalism, identity theory, certainly the really reductive stuff like behaviorism, all of that would still work if we weren't conscious, if we were like philosophical zombies. In fact, maybe I'll make a note. I'll just put in quotation marks. Philosophical zombies, which, if memory serves, I think Kim does mention early on in the book. But the idea is that there's nothing that it's like to be a zombie. A philosophical zombie would be behaviorally indistinguishable from you or I, but there would be nothing that it would be like to be a zombie. I think we ran through the thought experiment to see whether we found it conceivable or not. So I've just made a note of that here because this reminds me of what we talked about earlier with zombies and Kim. So maybe there's some points of contact I can make there if I'm writing my little paper on consciousness, right? It is not analyzable consciousness, that is, in terms of any explanatory system of functional states or intentional states, since these could be ascribed to robots or automata that behaved like people though they experienced nothing. Again, similar to some of the things we've talked about from Descartes, particularly what he says about the prospect of thinking machines or animals with mentality in the discourses. To continue, it is not analyzable in terms of the causal role of experiences in relation to typical human behavior for similar reasons. I do not deny that conscious mental states and events cause behavior, nor that they may be given functional characterizations. I deny only that this kind of thing exhausts their analysis. Any reductionist program has to be based on an analysis of what is to be reduced. If the analysis leaves something out, the problem will be falsely posed. It is useless to base the defense of materialism, what we've been calling physicalism, on any analysis of mental phenomena that fails to deal explicitly with their subjective character. For there is no reason to suppose that a reduction which seems plausible when no attempt is made to account for consciousness can be extended to include consciousness. Without some idea, therefore, of what subjective character of experience is, we cannot know what is required of a physicalist theory. I'm actually going to highlight all of this because I think this is quite important. Oh, no, we don't want to put a comment. We just want to highlight. So let's see. There's a question here. I just maybe blew my own mind a little bit, and maybe you can set me back on track. Okay, I'll try my best, Grant. Um, you can ask this question about conscious or unconscious things. Is this paper even really about consciousness at all? What is it like to be a bat? Is the exact same as it? Uh, well, it's not. Well, so, so what Nagel is saying is like we can be reasonably certain that bats are conscious. There's nothing it's like to be a table. There is something that it's like to be a bat. That's our sort of a starting assumption. But we'll never know, and we can't know. Yeah, I'm just using what am I using? PDF viewer, I think. Yeah. So what Nagel is saying here is that look, he's like I'm down with physicalism, reductionism. He says later in the paper like, yeah, any explanation of the mental is going to be a physicalist one. But if these means of reducing the mental to the physical leave consciousness out, um, then we're not then they're not going to do anything for us, right? Without some idea of what subjective character is, we cannot know what is required of a physicalist theory. So we're leaving something out. Functionalism, behaviorism, identity theory, they are all leaving something out. And the epistemological problem that we're going to get to in this paper is the problem of knowing um, knowing in the right way about the subjective character of experience so that we can formulate a physicalist theory to try and explain it. In the chat. Okay, yeah, no problem. So so Nagel doesn't want to give up physicalism, but he's pointing out a challenge, right? He says here, while an account of the physical basis of mind must explain many things, this appears to be the most difficult. It is impossible to exclude the phenomenological features of experience from a reduction in the same way that one excludes the phenomenal features of an ordinary substance from a physical or chemical reduction of it, namely by explaining them as effects on the minds of human observers. If physicalism is to be defended, the phenomenological features must themselves be given a physical account. But when we examine their subjective character, it seems like such a result is impossible. Let's highlight that too. The reason is that every subjective phenomenon is essentially connected with a single point of view, and it seems inevitable that an objective physical theory will abandon that point of view. So, if you want, you can think of this like we've got different points of view. Again, like I said earlier, science is objective. It's like a third person point of view, or as Nagel would say in other work, it's almost science is almost meant to take this viewpoint, which we call the view from nowhere. It's supposed to be perfectly objective. It's not, and there are a lot of reasons we can get into why it's not. But we need not concern ourselves with that. But that's the sort of scientific ideal, perfectly objective view from nowhere. But we're trying to examine the subjective character of conscious experience. And this subjectivity is essentially connected with this sort of point of viewness. And a scientific explanation necessarily abandons that point of view. And that's part of the reason why it misses what we really want to explain when it comes to subjective consciousness. All right, to continue, let me first try to state the issue somewhat more fully than by referring to the relation between the subjective and the objective, or between the pour soi and the en soi. This is far from easy. Facts about what it is like to be an X are very peculiar. So peculiar that some may be inclined to doubt their reality or the significance of claims about them. To illustrate the connection between subjectivity and point of view, and to make evident the importance of subjective features, it will help to explore the matter in relation to an example that brings out clearly the divergence between the two types of conception, subjective and objective. And here's where we get to the bat. I assume we all believe that bats have experience. After all, they are mammals, and there is no more doubt that they have experience than that mice or pigeons or whales have experience. I have chosen bats instead of wasps or flounders because if one travels too far down the phylogenetic tree, the tree of life, people gradually shed their faith that there is experience there at all. Sure, like, I think we all agree that bats and pigeons and whales are conscious, but maybe insects aren't, or at least not as conscious. Maybe there's something it's like to be a crab or a lobster, but their conscious experience is less rich or sophisticated, perhaps, right? Of course, some would deny that crabs and lobsters and insects have consciousness at all. Bats, more related to us than those other species, nevertheless present a range of activity and a sensory apparatus so different from ours that the problem I want to pose is exceptionally vivid, even though it certainly could be raised with other species. What Hegel is doing here, you could also do with dolphins, for example, as you'll see. Even without the benefit of philosophical reflection, anyone who has spent some time in an enclosed space with an excited bat knows what it is like to encounter a fundamentally alien form of life. I want to highlight all this because this is a good quote that I could perhaps use in my paper. Have you guys ever seen bats in action? Like, can you appreciate what Nagel is doing here with the bat example? Yeah, I think bats are just neat. I guess they're a bit weird, but I think they're neat. Um, my old apartment, I used to live down by Cathcart Park in Ottawa, and I was in this sort of multiplex with these long Montreal style apartments, and I had a balcony on the side. Yeah, the way they fly around. Yeah, well, that's what I'm getting to actually, is that the bats would come up um, sort of like into where our balcony was. There was no roof, but there were some corners. And it was like a neat little, really like echo chamber or amphitheater for the bats so that they could make their little squeaks and fly around and catch the bugs. And yeah, they kind of flit around. They certainly don't fly like birds. Um, and they're flying around making their little squeaks, basically echolocating for insects. And they're very cool, although perhaps slightly illogical from our point of view. I imagine if you're a bat, flying like that makes perfect sense. Um, so, hey, problem of subjectivity, right? I have said, Nagel continues, that the essence of the belief that bats have experience is that there is something that it is like to be a bat. Let's highlight that too. Actually, that's quite important. But I'm going to change the color because I want I don't want all my highlights to be the same. Kind of break it up a little. Let's change it to oh, can I not do that? Oh, like this. Let's change it to yellow. Okay. Now we know that most bats, the Microchiroptera, for example, or to be precise, perceive the external world primarily by sonar or echolocation, detecting reflections from objects within range of their own rapid, subtly modulated high-frequency shrieks. Their brains are designed to correlate the outgoing impulses with the subsequent echoes, and the information thus acquired enables bats to make precise discriminations of distance, size, shape, motion, and texture comparable to those we make by vision. But bat sonar, though clearly a form of perception, is not similar in its operation to any sense that we possess. And there is no reason to suppose that it is subjectively like anything we can experience or imagine. This appears to create difficulties for the notion of what it is like to be a bat. We must consider whether any method will permit us to extrapolate to the inner life of the bat from our own case, and if not, what alternative methods there may be for understanding the notion. And just to go to the footnote, by our own case, I do not mean just my own case, Nagel says, but rather the mentalistic ideas that we apply unproblematically to ourselves and other human beings. We assume that even though I can't know what it's like to be any one of you, um, I can kind of imagine my way in. So I'm not exactly in your shoes, but I can imaginatively project myself into your shoes or imagine that I am you, and I can get some idea. We can't do that with the bat because the bat's sensory world and probably its phenomenal world is just so different from ours. So I'm underlining this because I think it's important. I might want to go back to that and reread it while I'm working on my paper. But you get the idea. We see this a lot well, in films and in nature documentaries. Are there any examples that you can think of from either a film or a nature documentary that tries to show us what it's like to be some other kind of creature? And we're getting a little bit of ahead of ourselves, but I'd like to stop and reflect on this a little bit. B movie. Okay, that I've never seen it, but that's one of those animated movies, right? And I guess we're in that case we're anthropomorphizing the bees, aren't we? Post the entire script. Oh, no. What was that from? Somebody that's from something I don't quite remember, but Grant, your example of how animals can see colors that we can't. Yeah. Um, yeah, I've seen documentaries that try to show us how, for example, birds and insects can see in ultraviolet. Of course, we can't. Um, and they'll show us a representation of what that's like. Um, but that's really just an approximation. Of course, we can't know what it's like for the bird or the insect. I always get a kick out of Terminator 2, Judgment Day. Have you guys seen that one? Where our Terminator, our T-800, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, he's just traveled in time to find John Connor to save him. And so he's walking into the biker bar, and his vision is all like red. And it's like he can scan you and see if your clothes will fit, like bloop, bloop, bloop. I need your clothes, boots, and your motorcycle, you know. And then he beats the guy up and takes all his clothes and rides off on his motorcycle, as if that's what it's like to be a robot. Um, I don't know what it's like to be a robot, but is it like that? I don't know. Can I know? No, not really. Um, so, we can try and imagine our way into the perspectives of these different creatures, be they other biological organisms or like artificial life forms. Um, but we can never really get there, truly. Same with the bat. I can imagine that I am a bat, but then I'm just me imagining I am a bat. I could become a bat, and then I wouldn't have the tools to articulate what it's like to be a bat. Yeah, like that's an interesting example because you get the perspective of the cat, and but just think of how little that shows you, right? You see what the cat sees, but you don't have cat vision. You're not walking on four legs. You don't have whiskers and a tail. Like I can imagine that I'm able to climb up a tree really fast and that I'm really good at balancing and that I'll always land on my feet. But then I'm imagining that that's me doing that, as if I've been transformed into a cat with a human mind. We can get close, but we'll never really know. One thing I learned a little while ago, actually, about cats. Actually, I don't know where my cat is. Yo yo. Maybe I could show you. Yo yo, if he decides to show up. But all cats are far-sighted. So the way cats have excellent vision, um, but when it comes to the space in front of their face, um, they don't really see that well. So this is why, if you've ever shown your cat something novel, you might have seen them put their whiskers forward. Their whiskers are almost like reading glasses. They're our version, the cat's version of reading glasses, if you like. So now, whenever our cats do that with their whiskers, we say they're using their whisker glasses. But it's true. Cats will point their whiskers forward when they're dealing with something really close up because they can't see that well close up. Yeah. Well, the bonking, as I call it, I think is to leave pheromones. So they're marking you when they bonk you, they're like, you're mine. You're my person. And then yeah, they'll use their whiskers to check like because they can't see. Which is crazy. Um, the closest I have for that is like, well, what if I wore reading glasses, right? So that's another sort of way of highlighting this. Okay, I'm going to try to make it to about halfway through this paper before we break. So our own experience, Nagel continues, provides the basic material for our imagination, whose range is therefore limited. Quite like, well, really what I was just saying. So I'll just highlight that so that I have to change my color again. Just change back to orange. It will not help to try and imagine that one has webbing around on one's arms, which enables one to fly around at dusk and dawn, catching insects in one's mouth. That one has very poor vision and perceives the surrounding world by a system of reflected high-frequency sound signals. And that one spends the day hanging upside down by one's feet in the attic. Actually, bats actually do see pretty well. It's just that to hunt, they supplement their vision with echolocation. But bats do have really good vision, but maybe not much better than ours at night. So if you want to see insects flying around that you can eat, you've got to supplement it with sonar. And some bats will do this in very sophisticated ways. Some bats can use the Doppler shift to home in on their target. Some bats emit very loud clicks, so they actually have these protective flaps that close when they make a click and then open just so they can hear the echo, right? Very sophisticated. Um, insofar as I can imagine this, which is not very far, it tells me only what it would be like for me to behave as a bat behaves. But that is not the question. I want to know what it is like for a bat to be a bat. Highlight that too. Yet if I try to imagine this, I am restricted to the resources of my own mind, and those resources are inadequate to the task. I cannot perform it either by imagining additions to my present experience or by imagining segments gradually subtracted from it, or by imagining some combination of additions, subtractions, and modifications. You can't imagine your way into what it's like to really be a bat for the bat. I can imagine what it's like to be a human as a bat, or I can humanly imagine what it's like to be a bat, but I can never know what it is like for the bat to be the bat. My mind and its own limits prevent that. To continue, to the extent that I could look and behave like a wasp or a bat without changing my fundamental structure, my experiences would not be anything like the experiences of those animals. Again, like if I could be like shrunk down and put in a bat body. On the other hand, it is doubtful that any meaning can be attached to the supposition that I should possess the internal neurophysiological constitution of the bat. Even if I could by gradual degrees be transformed into a bat, nothing in my present constitution enables me to imagine what the experience of such a future stage of myself, thus metamorphosed, would be like. So we're not talking about like, a Kafka-esque metamorphosis where we're transformed into a different creature, but we remain ourself on the inside, as it were. No, if I were transformed into a bat, then I would really be a bat, but nothing in my present condition enables me to imagine what that would be like. The best evidence would come from the experience of the bats, if only we knew what they were like. Just highlight that so that I've got a little sort of bookend. I know all this is important, but draw attention to it when I revisit it later. So if extrapolation, oh, there's something in the chat. Let's look here. If I were fully transformed into a bat in the way that Nagel is suggesting here, I would not remember what it's like to be a human. Just as a bat doesn't know what it's like to be a human, and the human doesn't know what it's like to be a bat. Okay, so if extrapolation from our own case is involved in the idea of what it is like to be a bat, the extrapolation must be incompatible or incompletable. Sorry. We cannot form more than a schematic conception of what it is like. For example, we may ascribe general types of experience on the basis of the animal's structure and behavior. Thus, we describe bat sonar as a form of three-dimensional forward perception. We believe that bats feel some version of pain, fear, hunger, and lust, and that they have other more familiar types of perception besides sonar. But we believe that these experiences also have, in each case, a specific subjective character, which it is beyond our ability to conceive. Just highlight that. Uh, well, the idea is if my brain was turned into a bat brain, I don't think I would be able to remember my human experiences the same way as I would if I remained human. I think that's the idea. Does that make sense, Shannon? That's at least my. I mean, it depends. Bat brains are very small. Even if I remembered everything, but I now had a bat brain, I could now not communicate what it's like to be a bat. Maybe. And if there is conscious life elsewhere in the universe, it is likely that some of it will not be describable even in the most general experiential terms available to us. The problem is not confined to exotic cases, however, for it exists between one person and another. The subjective character of the experience of a person deaf and blind from birth is not accessible to me, for example, nor presumably is mine to him. This does not prevent us from believing prevent us each from believing that these others' experience has such a subjective character. If anyone is inclined to deny that we can believe in the existence of facts like this, whose exact nature we cannot possibly conceive, he should reflect that in contemplating the bats, we are in much the same position that intelligent bats or Martians would occupy if they tried to form a conception of what it was like to be us. I'll highlight this. Here he means Martians broadly, alien life, intelligent alien life. Think of well, what are some recent examples from some recent science fiction films of radically different alien life where we have to try and understand one another? I mentioned a couple in the class already. Yeah, Arrival. So the heptapods from Arrival. Well, Paul, I mean, interesting example. Paul is quite humanoid. I mean, like truly alien. But yeah, Arrival is good. The heptapods, right? Are very different from us. What else? Men in Black? I suppose. I haven't really seen Men in Black in forever. There was a lot of goop in that movie. The facehuggers and Alien. Well, better yet, the xenomorphs. What is it like to be a xenomorph? Um, Avatar. Avatar is different because you can know what it's like to be one of those. You go in, you zoop, and they put your consciousness in your avatar, and now you know what it's like to be a Navi. I mean, really, like not different examples. So Arrival was good. Um, I keep going on about Project Hail Mary, but Rocky the Iridian. I love this movie because he's such a great example of this. I mean, and he communicates with sound, and he senses in his environment with sound, like a bat. But can the pod people? Who are the pod people, Shannon? I don't know who the pod people are. Like from Prometheus or Shannon's going to find out the name of the pod people movie. Inception? That's about dreams, right? Yeah, they can go into dreams. Uh, but I mean the Martians or intelligent bats would maybe be like the way I imagine Martians is alien, like the heptapods from Arrival or Rocky and his Iridian compatriots. Um, they're so alien that we grant that they have experiences, but we're so different that we'd each be in the same position, the same position we are with respect to the bat in terms of the problem of subjectivity. Yeah, Invasion of the Body. I am embarrassed to admit, Shannon, I haven't actually seen it. Um, I definitely should. But yeah, it sounds like what have you said here? The aliens take over the bodies of people. Their experience isn't the same, though. Yeah, so maybe it's a good example because even if the aliens are able to take over a body, they're experiencing what it's like to be a body snatcher who has snatched a human body, not what it's like to be a human. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I haven't seen Disclosure Day yet. That's why I didn't bring it up. But I guess those are, I don't know how alien those aliens are. I hope they're not humanoid. I'm sick of humanoid aliens. I like humanoid aliens are okay if I'm watching Star Trek or something, but I want to see some non-humanoid aliens, you know? Parasite. Is that the anime where he has a little parasite guy in his right hand? Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. From yeah, a lot of Doctor Who examples. Yeah, so we've covered the bases. Good, good. Timothy, go ahead.
What about I think I watched a movie called The Shimmer.
You mean Annihilation?
Oh, sorry, Annihilation. Yeah,
Yeah,
Annihilation. And then they had this thing called the Shimmer, and
yeah. That was weird. Uh,
Mhm.
really freaky. That was really freaky.
yeah,
But maybe I still don't quite understand that movie, but I think maybe when they come out of the shimmer, they're different. They're
it,
alien
I think it
duplicates.
refracts matter, and I guess at least what I wrote when I analyzed it was the we can't really understand or comprehend what the goals are because maybe it like
Mm.
doesn't have any direct goals, like it just does stuff.
Yeah, just plays around with
This
matter,
refracts
perhaps.
matter, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So all good examples that highlight the position that we're in and the position that these creatures would be in with respect to us. To continue, the structure of their own minds might make it impossible for them to succeed, at forming a conception of what it would be like to be us. But we know they would be wrong to conclude that there is not anything precise that it is like to be us, that only certain general types of mental state could be ascribed to us. Perhaps perception and appetite would be concepts common to us both, perhaps not. We know they would be wrong to draw such a skeptical conclusion because we know what it is like to be us. And we know that while it includes an enormous amount of variation and complexity, and while we do not possess the vocabulary to describe it adequately, its subjective character is highly specific and in some respects describable in terms that can be understood only by creatures like us. The fact that we cannot expect ever to accommodate in our language a detailed description of a Martian or bat phenomenology should not lead us to dismiss as meaningless the claim that bats and
Uh,
Martians have experiences fully comparable in richness of detail to our own. It would be fine if someone were to develop concepts and a theory that enabled us to think about those things, but such an understanding may be permanently denied to us by the limits of our nature. And to deny the reality or logical significance of what we can never describe or understand is the crudest form of cognitive dissonance. I don't know. Here, I wonder if there are any Wittgenstein fans in the room. At the end of the Tractatus, well, he wraps it up by saying, um, whereof we cannot speak, thereof we must remain silent." Nagel's certainly not taking that approach here. Um, but this is a rabbit hole I really don't want to go down today. So let's see. How are we doing? We're on page 8. Let's go one more page and then have a little break. Or I'll take questions and then we'll have a break. This brings us to the edge of a topic that requires much more discussion than I can give it here, namely, the relation between facts on the one hand and conceptual schemes or systems of representation on the other. That's very important. This brings us, every time you see this brings us to something, that's the author saying, hey, pay attention, we're getting to the point. My realism about the subjective domain in all its forms implies a belief in the existence of facts beyond the reach of human concepts. This is the thing that I think that Wittgenstein would deny, or I could be wrong about that. I'm no expert, but at least early Wittgenstein would say, if we can't talk about it, it may as well, who cares? We can't understand it. We can't know it. Don't worry about it. Um, Certainly it is possible for a human being to believe, well, maybe he wouldn't because he does, like, there are other creatures. If a lion should speak, we would not understand what he says. He doesn't deny non-human conceptual systems. He just doesn't think that we would ever understand them. Anyway, this is not a class about Wittgenstein, so forget I said anything. Certainly, it is possible for a human being to believe that there are facts which humans never will possess the required concepts to represent or comprehend. I'm going to highlight that too. Indeed, it would be foolish to doubt this given the finiteness of humanity's expectations. After all, there would have been transfinite numbers, even if everyone had been wiped out by the Black Death before Cantor discovered them. So, discovered or not, transfinite numbers would have been a thing. They were discoverable. One might also believe that there are facts which could not ever be represented or comprehended by human beings, even if the species lasted forever, simply because our structure does not permit us to operate with concepts of the requisite type. This impossibility might even be observed by other beings. But it is not clear that the existence of such beings, or the possibility of their existence, is a precondition of the significance of the hypothesis that there are humanly inaccessible facts. After all, the nature of beings with access to humanly inaccessible facts is presumably itself a humanly inaccessible fact. Reflection on what it is like to be a bat seems to lead us, therefore, to the conclusion that there are facts that do not consist in the truth of propositions expressible in a human language. We can be compelled to recognize the existence of such facts without being able to state or comprehend them. That is very important. We're highlighting that. So, Nagel's saying here, like, look, there are facts out there that would be facts that we can know but might not know yet, or might not have known had things been different. So, for example, maybe the Greeks never discovered prime numbers. Prime numbers were still a thing, right? Or transfinite numbers. Maybe Cantor never discovered them. They'd still be a thing, just not known, but we could know them. But there are also facts that we can acknowledge exist, but that we can never really know, and that they're not expressible in human language, or they're not cognizable owing to the structure of our mind. And we can admit that there are those facts that are, for lack of a better term, beyond our comprehension. And that actually is quite Wittgensteinian. Okay. I shall not pursue this subject, however. It is bearing on the topic before us, the mind body problem, is that it enables us to make a general observation about the subjective character of experience. Whatever may be the status of facts about what it is like to be a human being or a bat or a Martian, these appear to be facts that embody a particular point of view. Subjectivity. Actually, I'm going to write that there. Subjectivity exclamation mark. Just to remind myself, hey, this is the key. This is what this paper's all about. The problem of subjectivity as it's come to be known. I am not adverting here to the alleged privacy of experience to its possessor. Remember the beetle in the box from the chapter on the mental theater. When you're reading this, you could put a little note there that says beetle in the box. Actually, I'll do that now. Put a little note. Beetle in the box. Spell box right. There we go. Beetle in the box. Rather, it is a type. It is often possible to take up a point of view other than one's own, so the comprehension of such facts is not limited to one's own case. There is a sense in which phenomenological facts are perfectly objective. One person can know or say of another what the quality of the other's experience is. So I can look, say, like, hey, so and so seems to be in such and such a way, such and such a mood, or such and such a state of mind, right? They are subjective, however, in the sense that even this objective ascription of experience is possible only for someone sufficiently similar to the object of ascription to be able to adopt his point of view. I can empathize with other people, that is, put myself in their shoes, take their perspective. I can do that with other people because I am also a person. I am also a human person. I can do this to a limited extent with some non human animals. I can't do it with a bat or a Martian because I'm not sufficiently similar to the object of ascription. So let's highlight this. The more different from oneself the other experiencer is, the less success one can expect with this enterprise. In our own case, we occupy the relevant point of view, but we will still have as much difficulty understanding our own experience properly if we approach it from another point of view as we would if we tried to understand the experience of another species without taking up its point of view. Okay. Um, I'm just going to highlight here because I think maybe, do we want to do a little bit of questions and then take a break? This is fun. I kind of like doing it this way. Kind of like reading the whole paper with you. Have you been reading along or listening to what I've been saying? And if you have, what do you think so far? Of the paper, not of my reading the paper, I should say. Makes sense. Completely agree with Nagel. Okay, good. This is much better. Much better than Kim. Kim is technical, okay? I like Kim. It's technical. It's tough. This is more like, hey, you really think you could imagine what it's like to be a bat? I don't think so, right? Yeah, Kim is like the meme with the guy's brain that comes all the way out. Yeah, it's good. And I like there's also a temptation, I think, when you encounter the kind of problem that Kim that or that Nagel is trying to grapple with here. Some people, I think, do the equivalent of giving up, and they resort to a kind of mysticism, either panpsychism, substance dualism, quantum theories of the mental. Um, I think that's almost like giving up. Kim is saying, or Nagel is saying, look, the answer to this is going to be a physical one. There is a physicalist explanation of the mental, including of consciousness. We just aren't going to figure it out. Or at least we haven't figured it out yet because we're not equipped cognitively or linguistically to do it. At least he doesn't give up. Next time we'll see Dennett is going to come along and do something different. Dennett does not think that we're ill-equipped to do this. Sure, it's going to be difficult, but Dennett thinks we need to change the way we think about consciousness to make it less mysterious. As Dennett says in the beginning of Consciousness Explained, consciousness is just about the last surviving mystery. A mystery is something we don't know how to think about yet. And a big part of Dennett's project was trying to figure out how to think about all of this, right? Nagel's like, maybe we can't do it. Dennett does think that we can. Um, so I'm at 338. I want to take a break at 340, but is there a question I can answer in 2 minutes so that we can break at 340? Okay. Oh, interesting question. So, long time ago, I had another cat named Spinner. Actually, this is a little dirty because I haven't had a chance to hang it up, but this is a little memorial for my old cat Spinner that my partner put together for me. And Spinner was a great cat. And one day, my partner found a mother and five kittens on her way back from the barn where she kept a horse. And so naturally, she rescued them. And we found a home for the mother and for all of the kittens. She kept one, and I kept the other. And because my cat's name was Spinner, I guess I wanted it. It made me think of a yo-yo. I don't know why, but I thought their names matched, so I just named him that. My partner thinks it's a very silly name, but I don't care because everybody thinks it's a cute name. Everyone else, when I take him to the vet, this is Yo-Yo. Oh, that's a cute name. So, and he's a cool guy. Uh, so rest in peace, Spinner. Spinner passed away um, almost well. Next month it'll have been 10 years. 10 years since I lost the little guy. And Yo-Yo's still kicking. Yo-Yo is 16. So that's the story behind his name. Yeah. And you know, and Oak and Yo-Yo has a brother, of course, who's back up in North Bay, who we're going to see. Uh, we're leaving tomorrow to go back, and his name is Oki, O-K-I, which is Japanese for enormous. And the reason is that Oki is indeed enormous. He's just a huge cat. Um, so we call him Oki because we're Japanophiles, and Oki is enormous. So that's the story. All right. Well, I'll see you guys in 15 minutes and we'll finish off this paper together, okay? All right. Stop share and pause recording. Okay, so we are back and we're going to continue with our close reading of Nagel. We'll just finish the paper off and I can take questions along the way as well as at the end. And that's it for today. Okay, so all of what we've been discussing so far, the limits of our point of view and this sort of subjectivity objectivity problem bears on the mind body problem. Uh, Nagel says, for if the facts of experience, facts about what it is like for the experiencing organism, are accessible only from one point of view, then it is a mystery how the true character of experience could be revealed in the physical operation of that organism. I'm gonna fully highlight this because that is important. That is like one of the main takeaways of this paper. In fact, just to differentiate it, let's change the color of all of this so that I've kind of marked out for myself. You don't have to do this the same way, but if I change the color, it's like, okay, this is especially important. This is one of the main takeaways of the paper. Okay, the latter, the true character of experience for the organism, is a domain of objective facts par excellence, the kind that can be observed and understood from many points of view and by individuals with differing perceptual systems. Oh, no, that's not the latter. Uh, the latter. Did he mean the former? I don't know. Currently, that seems to be the case, Matthew. Yeah. The latter is a domain of with differing perceptual systems. There are no comparable imaginative obstacles to the acquisition of knowledge about bat neurophysiology by human scientists. And intelligent bats or Martians might learn more about the human brain than we ever will. But when it comes to the subjective character, it's a different story. This is not by itself an argument against reduction. A Martian scientist with no understanding of visual perception could understand the rainbow or lightning or clouds as physical phenomena, though he would never be able to understand the human concepts of rainbow, lightning, or cloud, or the place these things occupy in our phenomenal world. I'll highlight this, go back to my orange color, or yeah, orange. The objective nature of the things picked out by these concepts could be apprehended by him because, although the concepts themselves are connected with a particular point of view and a particular visual phenomenology, the things apprehended from that point of view are not. They are observable from the point of view, but external to it. Hence, they can be comprehended from other points of view also, either by the same organisms or by others. Right? Birds, really intelligent birds, and humans can both understand all of the, for lack of a better term, physical facts about the colors of flowers. But neither of us will ever know what it's like to perceive a flower from the other point of view. Highly intelligent bird scientists could understand everything about plant biology, the physics of color, and not know what it's like to see a flower from a human perspective. Human scientists could do the same, but never really know what it's like to perceive a flower from a bird's point of view. Right? Lightning has an objective character that is not exhausted by its visual appearance, and this can be investigated by a Martian without vision. To be precise, it has a more objective character than is revealed in its visual appearance. In speaking of the move from subjective to objective characterization, I wish to remain non-committal about the existence of an endpoint, the completely objective intrinsic nature of the thing, which one might or might not be able to reach. It may be more accurate to think of objectivity as a direction in which the understanding can travel. And in understanding a phenomenon like lightning, it is legitimate to go as far away as one can from a strictly human viewpoint. I'm going to highlight that too because I really like what he says here about thinking of objectivity as a direction. And we can go in that direction and get close to perhaps completely objective to understanding the completely objective intrinsic nature of a thing, as he says, but we'll never exactly get there. We'll just go in that direction. When it comes to the objective physical stuff. In the case of experience, on the other hand, he continues, the connection with a particular point of view seems much closer. It is difficult to understand what could be meant by the objective character of an experience, apart from the particular point of view from which its subject apprehends it. I'll highlight this because I believe this is important, and I will change the color to yellow just to make it stand out to me a bit more. After all, what would be left of what it was like to be a bat if one removed the viewpoint of the bat? But if experience does not have, in addition to its subjective character, an objective nature that can be apprehended from many different points of view, then how can it be supposed that a Martian investigating my brain might be observing physical processes which were my mental processes, as he might observe physical processes which were bolts of lightning, only from a different point of view? How, for that matter, could a human physiologist observe them from another point of view? We appear to be faced with a general difficulty about psychological or psychophysical reduction. In other areas, the process of reduction is a move in the direction of greater objectivity. So, in the case of lightning and electrical discharge, for example, or toward a more accurate view of the real nature of things. Again, the real nature of things is like that perfectly objective sort of viewpoint that we're pointed towards. This is accomplished by reducing our dependence on individual or interspecies specific points of view toward the object of investigation. We describe it not in terms of the impressions it makes on our senses, but in terms of its more general effects and of properties detectable by means other than the human senses. The less it depends on a specifically human viewpoint, the more objective is our description. It is possible to follow this path because although the concepts and ideas we employ in thinking about the external world are initially applied from a point of view that involves our perceptual apparatus, they are used by us to refer to things beyond themselves, toward which we have the phenomenal point of view. Therefore, we can abandon it in favor of another and still be thinking about the same things. I'm going to highlight all of this too, because this is quite important. Go back to orange. Experience itself, however, does not seem to fit the pattern, right? So in the sciences, we start with observation with our senses, but we have so many apparatus available to extend our senses. And that's what gets us closer to the objective nature of reality, right? Experience itself, however, does not seem to fit the pattern. The idea of moving from appearance to reality seems to make no sense here. What is the analog in this case to pursuing a more objective understanding of the same phenomena by abandoning the initial subjective viewpoint toward them in favor of another that is more objective but concerns the same thing? Certainly, it appears unlikely that we will get closer to the real nature of human experience by leaving behind the particularity of our human point of view and striving for a description in terms accessible to beings that could not imagine what it is like to be us. This is another like key takeaway. So let's put it in blue. Right, by making the description of human consciousness, which is essentially subjective, as objective as possible, such that a Martian or an intelligent bat could understand it, we'd be getting away from what we actually want to explain, which is the subjective nature of human conscious experience. If the subjective character of experience is fully comprehensible only from one point of view, then any shift to greater objectivity, that is, less attachment to a specific viewpoint, does not take us nearer to the real nature of the phenomenon. It takes us farther away from it. I should highlight this as well. And I'll keep it in blue because it's quite important. Whoops. Where'd I go? Got to get this bit too. And I know I've been skipping a lot of the footnotes, but let's not skip this one. Um, where we're talking about point of view. The problem is not just that when I look at the Mona Lisa, my visual experience has a certain quality, no trace of which is to be found by someone looking into my brain. So this is again the Martian scientist examining our brains. For even if he did observe there a tiny image of the Mona Lisa, he would have no reason to identify it with the experience. What does this remind you of from what we learned this term? Guy who invented calculus. Who can tell me? Co-invented calculus. Well, he did co-invent, but not the thinker we're looking for. This is Leibniz's mill. Yeah, Leibniz's mill. Yeah, that's what it pretty much, Matthew. Like an alien scientist might be able to come to know more objective facts about human brains than human scientists ever could. Um, but that's not going to tell him what it's like for us to look at the Mona Lisa. It's just not the kind of thing you're going to find by looking in the brain. So similar to Leibniz's mill, you'd only see parts pushing and pulling and never anything mental. In a sense, the seeds of this objection to the reducibility of experience are already detectable in successful cases of reduction. For in discovering sound to be in reality a wave phenomenon in air or other media, we leave behind one viewpoint to take up another, and the auditory, human, or animal viewpoint that we leave behind remains unreduced. So we understand sound as vibrations in the air, for example. We get more objective, but we don't reduce the subjective sort of what it's like to be able to hear side of things. Is that because it's more like it, it's like more than one thing? We have feelings about colors and specific brushstrokes, and there might be mixed emotions, yada yada. Well, it's all of that. um it's a subjectivity. Your reaction to a work of art is subjective. It occurs from your point of view, and the more objective you get, the farther away from a single point of view you get, so you lose all of that. You can't read this out of the brain, as it were, or out of the activity in the brain. Wouldn't the alien be able to see our optical nerve sending the image of the Mona Lisa and then make that? Well, they would, yeah, but that's not our subjective experience. That's our brain activity. That's why this is the mind body problem. We're like, this is the mind body problem, right? Like, I can look at your brain and show you art and say, okay, these neurons are firing in these ways, but they're correlated with a feeling of admiration or whatever it is you have toward the painting. But that's not what it is like for you to appreciate the painting. So see how this is all connected to the mind body problem? This is what Nagel says when he means without consciousness the mind body problem is much less interesting. With consciousness it seems impossible. Yeah, that still doesn't tell them if their happiness is the same as ours. Yeah, yeah, or if their red is our red. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so sound. Members of radically different species may both understand the same physical events, In objective terms, and this does not require that they understand the phenomenal forms in which those events appear to the senses of members of the other species. Thus, it is a condition of their referring to a common reality that their more particular viewpoints are not part of the common reality that they both apprehend. The reduction can succeed only if the species-specific viewpoint is omitted from what is to be reduced. So, let's say human scientists and super intelligent bat scientists and super intelligent dolphin scientists all get together and they all can explain the objective facts about sound. It's vibrations of molecules in some medium or another. We could all together, each of us could understand that. The super intelligent dolphin, the super intelligent bat, and the human. We could all understand that. But we could not understand what the experience is like for each of us, because we have to omit that from what we are trying to reduce sound to, um, oscillations in whatever medium, water, air, etc. I mean both. I mean they're creatures. Like if dolphins became super advanced and had dolphin science and bats had bat science, we could all come together and talk about um the facts, the physical facts, the objective facts about yeah, good. It's a good question. Um that so like we could all understand the objective things. It's like, okay, so like how we would communicate with aliens if there were aliens out there. How would we do it? Grant or one of the other astrophysicist people, how we would do it, yes? I mean, how would we do it? I don't mean the means. I mean, what would we communicate? How would we work out how to talk to each other? I'll tell you. We would probably, yeah, yeah, the golden record does. Math, universal constants. Exactly. We would figure out some way of representing something like the speed of light. And although we might represent it differently, they could figure it out. And yeah, the golden record does this. Like, for example, the golden record contains a lot of information about this, contains our location, and all of that. It's not just whale songs and Chuck Berry on that record. It's a lot of sciencey stuff, and we'd be able to work out that we had figured the same things out about nature. We'd use mathematics as a language to tell each other what we know about nature by giving each other like constants, laws, things like that, and we could work it out. That's what these scientists would be doing. If we had a bat, a human, and a dolphin scientist, we could all like share um, our discoveries about how sound propagates through air and water and express it mathematically. And sure, dolphin math and bat math might look different than human math, but they would represent the same facts. But in doing so, we're leaving out the first person perspective of the bat, the dolphin, and the human. Make sense? That's what Nagel means. Yeah, exactly. We're still left with the problem of subjectivity. So I'm going to highlight this just once again, and I'll change it back to my usual color. Thus, it is a condition of their referring to a common reality. Prime numbers are prime numbers everywhere in the universe, and no natural process produces them. So if we wanted to say we are here, we could just send a repeating string of prime numbers, right? So we'd be referring to this common reality, but their particular viewpoints are not a part of that common reality. Have we genuinely seen a good answer to subjectivity yet? They've all felt like a shot in the dark so far. Like functionalism kind of ignores it. Dualism is just kind of like, yeah, different substance. Um, I mean, I can give you my opinion. Um, I, so I think we're still trying to figure out how to think about it. I don't think it's impossible for us to figure out, but I think we're still trying to figure out how to think about it. And who knows, this problem could be solved one day. One of you might solve this problem. You never know. Well, maybe in addition to figuring it out, we're figuring out how to figure it out, if that makes sense. Okay. But while we are right to leave this point of view aside in seeking a fuller understanding of the external world, we cannot ignore it permanently, since it is the essence of the internal world and not merely a point of view on it. Most of the neo-behaviorism of recent philosophical psychology results from the effort to substitute an objective concept of mind for the real thing, in order to have nothing left over which cannot be reduced. If we acknowledge that a physical theory of mind must account for the subjective character of experience, we must admit that no presently available conception gives us a clue as to how this could be done. And that reminds me of what you just said, Grant. You know, a lot of the theories we've covered in this very class seem to leave subjectivity out. Or if they include it, like dualism, it's just magic, or it creates more problems than it solves. Like dualism, substance dualism would maybe to some seem appealing on, for solving this. I don't think it is, because I can still say, okay, so my mind's a mental substance, but why does red look like red? Is that just a brute fact? Not to mention you've got the mind body problem on dualism too. So the problem is unique. If mental processes are indeed physical processes, then there is something it is like intrinsically to undergo certain physical processes. What it is for such a thing to be the case remains a mystery. What should be drawn from these reflections? And what should be done next? It would be a mistake to conclude that physicalism is false. Nothing is proved by the inadequacy of physicalist hypotheses that assume a faulty objective analysis of mind. This this is all very important. It would be truer to say that physicalism is a position we cannot understand because we do not at present have any conception of how it might be true. So this is important because this is where we're getting into the second, I think, oft overlooked aspect to this paper. Nagel is not saying we should reject physicalism, but he is saying that we have no idea how a physicalist explanation of conscious experience would work. We don't know how that would work. That's what we don't know. That's the epistemological problem. Perhaps it will be thought unreasonable to require such a conception as a condition of understanding. After all, it might be said, the meaning of physicalism is clear enough. Mental states are states of the body. Mental events are physical events. We do not know which physical states and events they are, but that should not prevent us from, excuse me, from understanding the hypothesis. What could be clearer than the words is and are? But I believe it is precisely this apparent clarity of the word is that is deceptive. Usually, when we are told that X is Y, we know how it is supposed to be true. But that depends on a conceptual or theoretical background and is not conveyed by the is alone. So we know that lightning is electric discharge in the atmosphere. And we have a concept not only of the is, but of how it's true. Like, oh yeah, Molecules in the air, static electricity, the charge builds up, negative goes down, positive goes up. Okay, yeah, I can see how lightning is. I can not only see how lightning is electrical discharge, I can see how it is electrical discharge. We know how both the x and y refer and the kinds of things to which they refer, and we have a rough idea how the two referential paths might converge on a single thing, be it an object, a person, a process, an event, or whatever. But when the two terms of the identification are very disparate, it may not be so clear how it could be true. We may not have a rough idea of how the two referential paths could converge, or what kinds of things they might converge on, and a theoretical framework may have to be supplied to enable us to understand this. Without the framework, an air of mysticism surrounds the identification. I'm going to highlight this. Because when I'm rereading this, say I'm writing a paper on consciousness, this is one I might want to reread once or twice and try and think about it in the context of what you've read in Kim or perhaps in some of the optional but recommended readings, particularly the identity theory stuff and the reductionist stuff. This explains the magical flavor of popular presentations of fundamental scientific discoveries, given out as propositions to which one must subscribe without really understanding them. For example, people are now told at an early age that all matter is really energy. But despite the fact that they know what is means, most of them never form a conception of what makes this claim true because they lack the theoretical background. And yeah, I can relate to this. I learned in school and by reading books that matter and energy are interchangeable. That's E equals mc squared, right? Um, I've known that formula since I was in like the fourth or fifth grade, and I've kind of had a rough idea of what everything in the formula means, what it stands for. But I don't think I really understood the how until I took a science course in university, right? And we actually started to do calculations like, okay, like we'd calculate our mass and calculate how many joules of energy would be released if my entire body was converted to energy. Turns out it's a lot. I'm like a walking nuclear bomb. Um, so are all of you. It's just that I'm not very fissile. Um, Other stuff too, like so matter is energy and energy is matter. They're interchangeable. Other stuff too. Give me some examples where you have understood the is, but not the how. Maybe this paper, right? Or some of the readings that we've covered here in this course. The brain. Yeah, like we understand the brain. That's a perfect example, Grant. We understand the brain is responsible for mentality, including consciousness. We do not understand completely how that happens. And like these new scientific discoveries, like when Einstein, um, you know, rose to fame because I think it was the Eddington expedition that used the solar eclipse to confirm that gravity bends light, which confirmed his theory of relativity. Right? He became famous, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, yes, E equals mc squared, matter, energy, of course." But only the scientists really understood what that meant. Other people were just kind of like, "Oh, that's magical, right?" Clouds being water, yeah, because you're like, "But how?" And then, Bill Nye the Science Guy comes and tells you, he says, well, it's kind of like when you have a shower and you see the condensation on the window. It's like that, and eventually you acquire enough concepts that you can understand how it is that clouds are water vapor, right? So this explains the magical flavor of these presentations, right? Um, Back to the chat. How ChatGPT works. Well, I can tell you how it works. By stealing. No. Well, yes, actually. That's how the companies work. But yeah, it's a large language model. It's basically really complicated predictive text. So, okay, one more thing in the chat, then we go. Okay. Yes, preach. Yes, those companies, I don't like them. I don't like them. Don't get me started. At the present time, the status of physicalism is similar to that which the hypothesis that matter is energy would have had if uttered by a pre-Socratic philosopher. Somebody like Thales of Miletus or something comes along and says, "What if matter and energy are interchangeable?" He would have been right, but he would have had no idea how it might have been true, right? In order to understand the hypothesis that a mental event is a physical event, we require more than an understanding of the word is. I'll highlight that. The idea of how a mental and a physical term might refer to the same thing is lacking, and the usual analogies with theoretical identification in other fields fail to supply it. They fail because if we construe the reference of mental terms to physical events on the usual model, we get either a reappearance of separate subjective events as the effects through which mental reference to physical events is secured, or we get a false account of how mental terms refer. For example, a causal behaviorist one. Strangely enough, we may have evidence for the truth of something we cannot really understand. Suppose a caterpillar is locked in a sterile safe by someone unfamiliar with insect metamorphosis, and weeks later the safe is reopened, revealing a butterfly. If the person knows that the safe has been shut the whole time, he has reason to believe that the butterfly is, or was once, the caterpillar, without having any idea in what sense this might be so. One possibility is that the caterpillar contained a tiny winged parasite that devoured it and grew into the butterfly. That's not what happens, but you get the idea. This butterfly box, we'll call this the butterfly in the box, right? Um, Someone who had no idea about insect metamorphosis would know that the butterfly is or once was the caterpillar, but would have no idea how the butterfly became what it is, having once been a caterpillar. It is conceivable that we are in such a position with regard to physicalism. So I'm going to highlight this because I think this is a really good example. And then I'll read on. It is conceivable that we are in such a position with regard to physicalism. Donald Davison has argued that if mental events have physical causes and effects, they must have physical descriptions. He holds that we have reason to believe this, even though we do not, and in fact could not, have general psychophysical theory. Remember this from Kim? What is this position called? We talked about it when we talked about uh, mental causation, I believe. Does anyone remember what this was called? It's a type of monism. So I'll give you a clue. It's a type of monism. What type of monism is it? It's anomalous monism, or the anomalism of mental states. Remember, Davidson argued that there cannot be any psychophysical laws. And here, how about a different question? Who felt like they did not understand that bit of Kim when he covered Davidson and his anomalism of the mental? Me, a lot of you. Don't worry, because I'll draw your attention to footnote 12. See mental events in da 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 da, where Davidson talks about it. Though I don't understand the argument against psychophysical laws. Thomas Nagel, um, well, I'll just bring you to the end briefly. Thomas Nagel of Princeton University did not understand what David was, what Donald Davidson was after there. So if you find it difficult, don't worry, you're not alone. I think I kind of get what it says, but I don't know. I don't know that I follow it. You know what I mean? I've got an uncertain certainty, as it were. Nagel, yeah, I believe so. Yeah, yeah. Davidson has the whole world confused. So, if you find the anomalism of the mental a little confusing, don't worry. So do like highly trained professional philosophers like Nagel. To continue, Davidson's argument applies to intentional mental events. Remember, not sensory events and reflexes and things like that, but intentional mental events, mental states with content. Yeah, yeah, PhD from Harvard. Yeah. So, PhD from Harvard teaches at Princeton. I don't understand Davidson's argument. Like, same, buddy. Um, Okay. So Davidson's argument applies to intentional mental events with mental states with content, but I think we also have some reason to believe that sensations are physical processes without being in a position to understand how. Davidson's position is that certain physical events have irreducibly mental properties, and perhaps some view describable in this way is correct, but nothing of which we can now form a conception corresponds to it, nor have we any idea what a theory would be like that enabled us to conceive it. Um, so Davidson thinks that, remember, all mental states are ultimately physical states, and we can formulate laws about physical states, but we won't be able to formulate laws about mental states, content-bearing mental states, and how they figure in mental causation. We won't be able to do that. Um, Nagel seems to be saying that maybe we could, but we don't yet have a conception how, right? Very little work has been done on this basic question, from which mention of the brain can be entirely omitted. Whether any sense can be made of experiences having an objective character at all. Does it really make sense, in other words, to ask what my experiences are really like, as opposed to how they appear to me? Highlight this. And you're going to see this in Dennett when we read Dennett. For Dennett, um, things like qualia are not part of the objective world. So for Dennett, there is no what it's really like to perceive red, because that's not part of the set of facts that describes the world. It describes something mental. We cannot genuinely understand the hypothesis that their nature is captured in a physical description unless we understand the more fundamental idea that they have an objective nature, or that objective processes can have a subjective nature. I should like to close with a speculative proposal. It may be possible to approach the gap between subjective and objective from another direction. Setting aside temporarily the relation between the mind and the brain, we can pursue a more objective understanding of the mental in its own right. At present, we are completely unequipped to think about the subjective character of experience without relying on the imagination, without taking up the point of view of the experiential subject. This should be regarded as a challenge to form new concepts and devise a new method, an objective phenomenology not dependent on empathy or the imagination. Though presumably it would not capture everything, its goal would be to describe, at least in part, the subjective character of experiences in a form comprehensible to beings incapable of having those experiences. Highly speculative. When I read this, I think to myself, I really like the sounds of that. I have no idea how it would work. No idea. I keep going back to that film, Project Hail Mary. Not only am I a total science nerd and I love that movie, I think it's a great illustration of this. There's that part where Rocky, right? Rocky's the alien, right? And he's got sound. He sees with sound. He's like the bat, but he doesn't have eyes, so he can't see what's on any of Grace's screens. So he makes a little mechanism. He makes a little piezoelectric crystal radar thing, so that he can convert the images into bumpy textures on a screen, which he can see, but like see in an echolocation sort of sense, like a bat, perhaps. So he can kind of use technology to uh, sort of imaginatively, semi-imaginatively perceive what he cannot perceive with just his sonar. But that's still not what it's like for us to see what's on the screen. Maybe this would look something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I the movie's great for illustrating this because like Rocky and Grace are so physiologically different and arguably cognitively and perceptually different. They have to they recognize one another as living thinking beings, but then they have to work out how to communicate. And that was one of my favorite parts of the movie was watching them figure out just how to talk to one another. It's like a few chapters back in Kim, or no, one chapter back. It's like mental content. Like instead of Carl saying "S regnet" whenever it's raining, Grace has to do something like that with Rocky, right? So very cool, very cool. And of course, with a rival, like that's the whole plot. They have to learn how to speak heptapod, right? Yeah, they do. I do want to read the book. I think I will. Um, after this class is done. Maybe that's what I'll read. Maybe I'll make a YouTube video about it. Um, what one more in the chat. Yeah, yeah. I remember the jazz hand. They did that in the movie, but um, I'll just have to read the book. So to continue, we're almost done. We would have to develop such a phenomenology to describe the sonar experiences of bats. Like Rocky when when they're discovering that there's life on Adrian, right? You know, Rocky says, "What Grace see?" Question. Rocky doesn't know what it's like to see anything in the way that we do, but he doesn't go like, "What Grace hear?" because he knows Grace doesn't work that way. So we're like that. We're like alien anthropologists almost. So we'd have to develop such a phenomenology to describe the sonar experiences of bats. But it would also be possible to begin with humans. One might try, for example, to develop concepts that could be used to explain to a person blind from birth what it is like to see. One would reach a blank wall eventually. I think you would reach a blank wall quite soon, in fact. But it should be possible to devise a method of expressing in objective terms much more than we can at present, and with much greater precision. The loose intermodal analogies, for example, red is like the sound of a trumpet, which crop up in discussions of this subject, are of little use. That should be clear to anyone who has both heard a trumpet and seen red. But structural features of perception might be more accessible to objective description, even though something would be left out. And concepts alternative to those we learn in the first person may enable us to arrive at a kind of understanding even of our own experience, which is denied us by the very ease of description and lack of distance that subjective concepts afford. Uh, this strikes me as very optimistic. Um, Even with our science fiction examples to try and flesh this out, I still really don't know how this would work because it's not a means of creating an apparatus to communicate or to see something like we do like scientific instruments. Um, like Nagel is talking about developing new concepts. And I think the problem of subjectivity remains. Like it would be great if we could do something like this. Again, I have no idea how we would do it, but that's the problem Nagel is highlighting. Yes, this is what we need. How would it work? No idea. Like apart from its own interest, a phenomenology that is, in this sense, objective may permit questions about the physical basis of experience to assume a more intelligible form. Aspects of subjective experience that admitted this kind of objective description might be better candidates for objective explanations of a more familiar sort. But whether or not this guess is correct, it seems unlikely that any physical theory of mind can be contemplated until more thought has been given to the general problem of subjective and objective. Otherwise, we cannot even pose the mind body problem without sidestepping it. And that I do agree with. I'm going to highlight this, and I'm also going to put a little quote here, or a little comment. I'm going to say in all caps, but how? To remind me that we're still at the problem of the how and not the is. And that is a first pass of this paper, which I will now save. Sure, well, let's save it there. I guess I'll have to get rid of all those comments for the next time I teach this class. But that is how I would take, this is not my first pass on this paper, but pretend that it is. That is how, um, that is how I would read a paper like this for, for research purposes. So if I'm working on a paper and I want to write my paper on consciousness, that's how I would do it. And this also has the benefit of me being able to go through the paper and explain things and to make sure that you understand it. Now, there's a lot we haven't covered here. You could make some points of contact between what Nagel says in this paper and Mary the color scientist, for example. Frank Jackson's Mary the color scientist, which maybe we can do because we do have a lot of time left. So, well, first, are there any questions about this reading, about anything we've covered today? What Nagel says about subjectivity, consciousness, and the problems we're facing for developing an objective or a physicalist account of consciousness? Any questions at all? We'll get to those, and then we'll do a fun thought experiment before we go. Oh, pardon me. Oh. Well, does a table have a point of view? Like, remember the beginning of Kim? We distinguish between inanimate and animate things, what's alive and what's not alive. And out of the things that are alive, we make a further distinction, things that have minds. Some people would say that, very few people would say that plants have minds. Um, but I think we'd all agree that dogs have minds, right? Even though plants and dogs are both alive. And we generally think that what it is that we need a mind to have this point of view, to be an experiencing subject. Yeah, but you could be a human table. Like those like the kind of like those statue guys, they paint themselves silver and just stand there. You could do something similar and just be a table if you wanted. I wouldn't want to be a table, but if I were a table, it wouldn't make much difference to me because I wouldn't know that I was a table, if that makes sense. Um, Well, I guess if there are no questions, to get at some of the like the difference between the subjective and objective, I put to you the following thought experiment, which is from a paper by Frank Jackson. Um, yeah, that's right. Yeah, mind body problem, Grant. We're all made of the same stuff. Rocks, trees, dogs, people. We're all made of the same stuff. We're all made of the same atoms that were blasted out of stars billions of years ago, right? We are made, as Carl Sagan, we're made of star stuff, and we have minds. Tables don't. To quote Sagan once more, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. But how does that work? We have no idea, right? How is it that the matter of the cosmos has become alive and aware? That is what we're dealing with here. That is what Nagel is trying to deal with. Okay, a little bit about physical facts, objective facts, and subjectivity. This is a thought experiment called Mary's Room, or Mary the Color Scientist. It was put forward by an Australian philosopher named Frank Jackson. So I ask you to imagine the following. Mary is a scientist who lives in the future. She has complete knowledge of the physical facts of color, color perception, the neuropsychology of vision. Complete, she knows every physical fact there is to know about all of that. But Mary has spent her whole life in a black and white room, observing the world through a black and white monitor. The room is such that even when Mary looks at her hands or looks at her reflection in the mirror, she sees everything in grayscale, right? In black and white. So Mary has never seen color, but she knows every physical fact there is to know about, like color, electromagnetic radiation, the neurophysiology of color vision. She knows all of it, but she's never experienced color. One day, Mary is let out of her room and she sees color for the first time. Will Mary be surprised? Or will she say, "Ah, I knew that's what color would look like"? What do you think? Surprised. Shock. Timothy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think she will have a subjective inner feeling or some sort of inner process that isn't consistent with everyone. Like, that's everyone. Yeah,
Like she'll be surprised.
yeah, yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Who thinks she won't be surprised? It's interesting because Daniel Dennett has argued that if we really allow Mary to know every physical fact, she should know what effects certain wavelengths of light will have on her brain and nervous system and what phenomenological experience will result. So if we imagine that Mary's captors give her a trick banana. Like this is Dennett. Like, what if they give her a trick banana and it's blue instead of yellow, and she goes, "Ah, this is what yellow looks like." Well, no, Mary should know everything about color, so she should know that the banana's not supposed to be that color. Um, maybe like a trip. I imagine it would be weird, but again, are we following the rules of the thought experiment? I'll be honest with you, I go back and forth on this. I used to be on the side of folks like Dennett and actually Jackson himself, who later changed his mind. Um, he thought initially Mary should be surprised, but then he changed his mind later. Um, well, no, Shannon, that's the thing. She does know everything about color, everything physical, everything objective about color. Um, so I used to be in that camp where I was adamant about Mary not being surprised because if Mary really knows everything there is to know, she shouldn't be surprised. But then I saw a total solar eclipse, right? I'm an astronomy nerd, have been since I was a kid, knew all about how eclipses work. Um, I know that they happen when the moon occludes the sun as they are on the ecliptic. Like the moon passes in front of the sun when it's going around. It can happen under certain conditions where actually we have one about every 18 months on Earth. It's just a lot of them happen to be in pretty remote areas. So I knew all of this stuff, but when the corona or when the sun finally disappeared behind the moon and I took my eclipse glasses off, I was not prepared for what it looked like. Like I knew all this astronomy stuff. I didn't know everything about astronomy, but I knew enough to be like, yeah, yeah, total solar eclipse. Moon passes in front of the sun, blocks it out. You can see the corona, you can see the stars. I took my eclipse glasses off and yelled quite loudly, "Holy shit!" because I was not prepared for what it looked like. And I think Mary is in a similar position, right? Yeah, like taking a picture versus seeing the real thing, Grant. And I wonder if Mary's a bit like that. Now, the original, this was originally part of something called the knowledge argument against physicalism, devised by Jackson. The idea is we say that Mary knows every physical fact. But if she's surprised when she sees color for the first time, that means there are more facts than just physical facts. Hence, physicalism is wrong. That's the argument, right? If Mary is not surprised, it's because she really did know everything there was to know. But another way to respond to it is that Mary has a different kind of knowledge now. Prior to leaving the room, she had propositional knowledge of facts about color and color vision. Knowledge that when she leaves the room and sees color from the first time, she has knowledge how. Well, I don't know. Are lambs also colorblind? I think they might be. I don't know. I don't have exhaustive knowledge of lamb color perception like Mary. Mary would know. Mary would know. So that's the argument. Mary steps out of the room having known all the physical facts about color and color perception, is surprised by seeing color. This implies that there are facts beyond physical facts, thus physicalism is wrong. Jackson did change his mind about this, but the response were, well, maybe Mary didn't learn a new fact, but came to appreciate the fact from a different perspective. So now she has procedural knowledge or knowledge how, and not just knowledge that. And that's an interesting point of contact with Nagel, um, who says that we have the is, but not the how. We know that X is Y, but we don't know how X is Y. Well, Mary does. Mary, if we allow her to know everything there is to know about color, she knows that the wavelength, such and such a wavelength of light is perceived as red. She just doesn't know what it is like. That's what Jackson would say. Again, it's a thought experiment. Some of you are going to say, no, Mary knows everything. That means she knows what red would look like. And we could give her a trick banana that's blue instead of yellow, and she would go, that's a trick. I know bananas are supposed to be yellow, and that one's blue, right? Or there's going to be people like Jackson who initially said, no, Mary will be surprised, which means if she knows all the physical facts, she still doesn't know everything about color perception because she doesn't know what it is like to perceive red until she sees it. It's meant to get at your intuitions about whether physicalism is true or not. Now, Nagel, as we just saw, does not think physicalism is false. He thinks there has to be a physicalist explanation. There could be a physicalist theory of consciousness. We just don't know how to do it. Jackson, at least early Jackson, says no, physicalism is wrong. Later, he changes his mind, though. So I'll leave you with that. I would like you to think about all of this. Think about what it's like to be a bat. Think about what Mary knows or does not know. Read about more of this. Start reading Dennett. Start reading Quine and Qualia. That is going to be very interesting, and I cannot wait to get to it. We'll probably spend all of the next class on it and maybe a little bit of our final class on Thursday before we hold our wrap-up discussion. But that's all I have for you. I really enjoyed reading this paper with you. I hope you enjoyed this too. It's a bit different from my usual approach. It's almost like what we would do in a seminar. like closely read something together and talk about it, right? Um, and yeah, I hope you found it all interesting and informative. If you're like, oh, I consciousness is very baffling and confusing, yes, welcome to the club. Uh, thank you all. And I'll see you on Wednesday for our penultimate class, our second last class. Pardon me, everyone. This is
Oh
my
man.
last day in Ottawa. I have to go run a quick errand, and then I am going to go fishing. Adrian, what's up?
Hey, I got a question about the proposal.
Yeah,
Have we gotten them back?
not yet. No.
Okay, because it's due in like a few days, and I don't.
Yeah, well, the final essay is due on the 26th.
Okay,
Yeah. And Jack and I are trying to get them done as soon as we can. Very latest, it'll be the last day of class, but we're trying to get it done before then. It's just been difficult for me because I've been doing a lot of traveling and some Ottawa stuff,
right.
and I'm
No,
heading back.
it'd just be unfortunate if we have like 3 days to write 1,800 words.
No, no, you're going to have more than that. You're going to
Oh,
have, yeah, no. The last day of class and the last day of the exam period, you've got over a week. And
oh,
the paper, like I said, 16 to 1800. It doesn't have to be 1800. The paper is 6 pages, basically 6 or 7 pages. So 1 page a day, um, and that's very doable.
right. Okay,
Yeah.
and
So,
then for the reflection assignments,
uh-huh.
that's due in a couple days. Right,
That's due on Thursday.
right. Okay.
Mhm.
Same idea as the first one.
Yep. Basically, pick anything that you find interesting and engage with it. Make sure you use the template. So, part one, part two, they say, I say. Critique it, but remember, critique doesn't mean, oh, this
Negative.
sucks, right?
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
negative.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
critique
yeah. So like,
means like I like this, but I don't like this. Maybe we could add or subtract something. We could modify something, or here's a new idea related to this that I came up with, right? Like, critique it. Go back to my instructional video that I did for the first reflection assignment for a refresher on what the assignment calls for, if you need to.
right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I know last time I did like a video game. Can I do like another video game, another piece of media? Same idea. Literally the exact same time.
Yes, just make sure that there's more philosophy than video game discussion.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
no problem. Timothy,
Right, so um the reflection, like you just said, we can expect about the first same as the first reflection.
yeah,
And
it's the
for
same.
the
But
right,
just don't
perfect.
don't do the topic you
Obviously,
did the
yeah,
first one, the
obviously not
first
the
time.
same topic.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Got that. For the I know you just finished saying the essay proposal maybe in a couple days, that'll be coming
Hmm.
out. For that, what type of feedback can we should we be expecting? Is it going to be like the first assignment where it's just small pointers, or is it going
No,
to be a directional like
it's going to be both. So
right, okay,
I'll
that's good.
point out what's gone wrong and what can be better, but I'll also make suggestions.
Right, so you might give us a bit of guidance on the direction of the final essay.
Yeah, that's like the whole point of doing the
Perfect.
proposal. So
Perfect.
yes,
Yeah,
you
that's what
will
I was
get,
looking for. Yeah.
yeah, that you will get that, and Jack will do the same thing.
Awesome.
I'm trying to mark a bit more than I did last time, but uh,
No rush, no rush. Yeah.
yeah, it's very busy time. You will have it on the last day of class, hopefully before, and you will have very constructive feedback with a lot of suggestions. Yeah.
And then it'll be busy time for us.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Shannon.
And are we able to change our like idea for the final paper?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can even start writing now, just don't overcommit. Like you can write a couple pages, then you get your proposal back, look at our feedback, and then maybe modify what you've already written.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right, any other questions before I skedaddle? All right. Always remember, if you do think of something, reach out via email. Again, with all the traveling, I've been a little bit slower at getting to emails, but I will answer you. So reach out if you have any questions or concerns. Otherwise, I'll see you all on Wednesday. Bye for now, everyone.